friends. So today we are going to do meal planning like it is 1940. This would have been right in the middle of World War II, and I have a cookbook that not only shares how to survive on a super low income to a moderate income to a more extravagant income, but has everything in it that you could possibly need to make your food stretch. So let's get into it. In order to stay practical with this, because I am still trying to create budget-friendly meals for ourselves on the daily, I did write down the 5 meals that we are most likely to eat on rotation. And then I wanted to see if I could find those meals in this cookbook, and I did find most of them. The first meal on my meal plan that is something I have both made a lot in the past, I still make today, and it is really budget friendly, is shepherd's pie. I am going to make the version from the book, but I might be tweaking it a little bit to add a few more vegetables. The second meal that I want to make, which will actually hopefully last us for 2 meals, is a roasted chicken, or in my case it will be a slow cooker chicken, and mashed potatoes and gravy. This is one of my favorite things, and I found a recipe in this book that actually does a stuffing inside the chicken, and I'm hoping with our leftovers to make the third meal of the week, which is chicken soup. In my case, it will be chicken, bacon, and potato. The fourth meal I want to make is called Russian cabbage soup, and it is basically like a cabbage and sausage soup. And then potentially I thought about also making old-fashioned fish pie. The last meal we're gonna make is something entirely new for me, and this is called sliced tomatoes with macaroni. That is the menu for the week. I am going to go see what I have in my freezer and my pantry so that I know what I need to buy. I'm going to calculate 2 different totals for all of you. I'm going to calculate one where I am utilizing everything I have, and I'm not going to include those in my budget. And then I'm going to calculate a budget for all of you who might be buying everything fresh so that you know how much all of it costs all together. Shepherd's pie has always been one of my favorite meals to make for our family. Not only does it feel really simple to make because it is mostly in one pan, but it is also really filling, and it has everything in it that we really love. It can be made relatively cheaply with canned vegetables and tomato paste, or if you would like to follow the recipe directly, it is over on my Ko-Fi along with all of the other recipes from this book that I use. If you do not like to peel potatoes, you can purchase red or gold potatoes and leave all of the skins on, but russet potatoes are going to be the cheapest option. In the cookbook, this recipe uses 2 medium-sized onions, peeled and chopped, 1/2 tablespoon of minced parsley, a cup of soup stock, 2 tablespoons of butter, a cup of tomato juice or stewed tomato, 2 to 3 cups of cold lamb, chopped fairly fine, 3 cups of fluffy whipped potatoes, and a 1/2 cup of grated cheese. I substituted in ground beef for the lamb and added some garlic, as well as using tomato paste instead of tomato juice, because I think those all add for better flavor and are also the cheaper options. And I also added a can of green beans because I like to have some vegetables in my shepherd's pie. When I have extra time, I also like to chop up carrots or celery or whatever other vegetables I might have and add those as well. But today I tried to keep it simple with just some canned vegetables and the tomato paste. You will want to saute your onions before you add the parsley, gravy, tomato, and then the chopped lamb, or in my case, the ground beef. And as you can see here, I also added Worcestershire sauce because I do think that adds to the flavor. And Worcestershire sauce is something that is used pretty prolifically in vintage recipes. You will want to simmer your mixture for half an hour or until the liquid is mostly reduced. And then put it all in a shallow baking dish, or like I have done, just cook it in a cast iron pan. Add the potatoes on top, sprinkle with the cheese, and cook it in the oven for about 30 minutes or until the top is browned and everything is heated through. I have so much fun doing all of the research and writing down ideas for videos like this, so definitely let me know if you would like to see more of them, because researching all of these recipes was almost as fun as making and tasting them. Speaking of doing a lot of writing and research and all of those things, I have been doing a lot of writing lately. As you all know, I published my first book back in August, and I am currently working on my second one, though I haven't figured out what I'm going to do yet. But of course, with a lot of writing comes a lot of research and a lot of tabs open and losing my place in where I am. And so that's where the sponsor of today's video comes in, who is Opera. Opera is a browser designed for faster, safer, and more organized web browsing. And as an author, I have to show you some of my favorite features because they are incredible for those of us writing novels, needing to keep track of research, and needing our proverbial book pages open while we write. I am currently working on a fantasy novel that requires a bit of research and poking around into myths and fairy tales, so one of my favorite features of Opera is the split screen, which allows me to have my working document open and whatever inspiration, research, or tidbit I am researching right there on the same page. I especially love this for utilizing my favorite writing friend, the thesaurus, to keep it right there with me as I write. Opera also has tab islands wherein you can group tabs together, so no more screens full of 5 million tabs open. Instead, I can switch to the tab island I need. I can organize my tabs by subject and find my research, my story writing tools, or my visual inspiration in a flash. And with the floating music player, I can fully control what I'm listening to as I write without having to constantly click through other tabs to change the mood. I can pause, play, or skip inside or outside the browser, and it won't disrupt my workflow in the slightest. I also love the ability to customize my browser's theme to what I love, and I know this is a little bit silly, but I tend to be a mood writer, so being able to customize the browser to the mood of what I'm writing is fabulous. When I'm writing my cozy fantasy, I can have this dark, moody theme, or I can switch over to my Edwardian romance and have the most beautiful vibes to reflect what I'm writing. Finally, tab traces leaves a subtle visual trace over my tabs, so when I have a million things going, I can easily retrace my steps and see where I was most recently. The more recent you were at a spot, the darker the tab trace will be. And with my ADHD, I really need this visual reminder. I have to say, since switching over to Opera to write this novel, I have far surpassed my usual productivity and written more than I have ever written. Opera has been a game changer for me as I continue to work on my future novels, and I know you'll love it too. Check the description below to download Opera for free today. Thank you so much to Opera for sponsoring this video, and let's get back into it. I think one of the things that is probably the hardest about cooking economically is that it does take a lot of work and time. Whether you are meal prepping or making things the day of, every meal that is made from whole foods and will be the least expensive is also probably going to be a little more time consuming. Side note, I found this ricer at the thrift store, and it's the first time I've used it to make mashed potatoes, and I don't think I will ever go back to making them any other way. It made the most fluffy, creamy potatoes we've ever had, and it was so much easier than mashing them with a potato masher. As a parent with neurodivergent children, it is always a challenge to find meals that my kids will actually love that are nutritious, and this is definitely one of those meals. Everyone loves it, and I never have leftovers. Despite making the biggest cast iron pan full that I could, we barely had any left when we were done.
Now, like I mentioned, I really wanted to make a meal that was new to me, and I particularly love tomatoes. I also have a lot of macaroni in my pantry, and I thought this would be a good way to use them up and try a new recipe. I started by blanching the tomatoes so that the skins were easy to peel off. If you would like to do this, you need to make an X on the bottom of each tomato and then stick it in boiling water for about 60 seconds, then dunk it in ice water to stop the cooking, and voila, you have peeled tomatoes. For this recipe, you will need 2 cups of macaroni, 6 peeled and sliced tomatoes, a teaspoon of sugar, a few grains of pepper, 1.5 cups of grated cheese, a cup of soup stock or brown sauce or gravy, and 3/4 cup of buttered crumbs. I used Italian breadcrumbs, which I got for several recipes this week. This was a really quick and easy meal to make, and I actually made it for lunch because I was trying to meal prep, and in general, I was also just really hungry and wanted to try this. But I do think it would be a great meal for a family, especially if you add vegetables or another side dish, maybe a protein or something like that. Personally, I think I would add more cheese next time, but I was pleasantly surprised by how good this was, considering the only seasoning called for was sugar and some pepper. I think the addition of the soup stock really helped to bring the salt into it, and the crumbs and the butter on top made for a really delicious, crunchy topping. Overall, as you're about to hear, my kids were actually more a fan of this than I thought they would be, and I also ate a good portion for lunch. It was really delicious.
Good? You like it?
I want a plate of it.
So for the savory chicken, I am actually going to deviate from the vintage method and try this recipe in a crock pot, including the stuffing, which I am going to put together, and I'm going to stuff inside the chicken and put it all in the crock pot and see how that goes. It should be fine, but we'll see. We will see how this works out. Hopefully it works out okay. I'm gonna get into it.
Making the stuffing this way is something new for me. I have never actually made stuffing from scratch, and I had no idea if it would turn out well. I did add in some garlic salt just to ensure that it had a good flavor, but for the stuffing, it calls for 4 cups of cubed white bread, a teaspoon of salt, 1/2 teaspoon of powdered sage, which I did not have, so I added Italian seasoning, a 1/4 teaspoon of pepper, garlic, minced parsley, and butter, as well as a tablespoon of minced onion. I was also supposed to add 2 eggs to this stuffing, and I completely forgot, but it turned out delicious. For the chicken itself, you can either look on my Ko-fi to find the recipe for it, or you can do what I am doing here, which is adding onion powder, garlic salt, and some Italian seasoning to a whole cube of butter, which I then rub all over the chicken. I was having a little bit of trouble rubbing it over this chicken. I don't know what was going on. Normally, I find it much easier to cover the chicken with the butter mixture. This is basically my foolproof way to cook a crockpot chicken. Not only does it give you a really moist and delicious crockpot chicken, but then you have enough juices left over to make a gravy. Once I had fished out the chicken and all of the bones and ensured there was nothing left in there except for the onions and celery which I had put in to cook with it, I blended up what was left in the crockpot and then poured it into a pan to make gravy.
Ooh, that made a lot of
Apparently, I forgot to film making the rest of the meal, but the stuffing turned out incredible, and I just wish that there had been more.
Good morning, friends. So today I am going to meal prep the last 3 meals on the menu, which is Russian cabbage soup with sausage, some leftover soup from the chicken yesterday, and a fish pie. I'm going to freeze the fish pie and the soups, and that way we just have meals to pull out for the rest of the week. So let's get started.
I am a really big fan of making soup, especially as the weather gets colder, and I also really love cabbage-based soups. My grandma used to make a really good borscht, which is beet and cabbage soup, and this kind of reminded me of that, except there were no beets. For this recipe, you will need 2 tablespoons of butter, 2 large onions peeled and chopped, a pint of chopped cabbage, or in my case I used a whole cabbage head, 3 tablespoons of flour, 1/2 tablespoon of minced parsley, and 3 pints, which is 6 cups, of vegetable or meat stock, as well as salt and pepper to taste, and sausage balls, which you will make and add in the last 15 minutes of cooking. After sauteing the onions and the cabbage together, I added in the flour and then poured in 8 cups of water because I had used extra cabbage and wanted to cover it completely. I then added some chicken stock and stirred well, and I boiled this for about an hour. Towards the end of the hour, I made the sausage balls, which is a 1/4 pound of sausage meat, 1 egg yolk, and 3/4 cups fine dried breadcrumbs, as well as scraped onion juice, which I did not add in. Instead, I added in a little bit of onion powder. I also added an extra egg yolk and a little bit of the egg white because I used more sausage than it called for, and I wanted to ensure that everything was moist. Combine the ingredients and form them into marble-shaped balls, which I made them slightly larger. Roll them in flour and cook them 15 minutes in the boiling soup. This was by far one of the easiest soups I have ever made, even though it has the meat in it, because you don't have to saute the meat beforehand, so the prep work is fairly minimal. The flavor was incredible. If you like cabbage-based soups, you will love this. But now we're going to move on to the chicken and bacon soup, which is made out of the leftovers from the roast chicken we made earlier in the week. And this is a recipe that I pretty much just wing every time, and it never fails. I used 2 onions diced up, or if you have large onions, you can use those. And I added about 5 potatoes, which I peeled and cut up into cubes. This again is one of my favorite things to do because you can use whatever vegetables sound good to you or that you have in your pantry. You can also add canned vegetables if that is more your style, but I like to add fresh celery, fresh carrots, some potatoes, some bacon, and some onions. I also added in some diced garlic. You will want to, of course, saute your onions first, but before that, I add in some chopped bacon. I think I took about 5 to 6 thick sliced pieces of bacon and chopped them up and put them in the pan. I would then use the fat from the bacon to saute the onions and the garlic in, and then add in all of the other ingredients and put in enough soup stock to cover everything. This is one of those soups that you want to cook for as long as possible to let all the flavors meld, and I personally prefer to cook it until the carrots no longer taste like carrots because I don't really like carrots unless they're in this soup. This also helps the celery to not taste like celery, and I don't know if you got the theme here, but I just apparently don't like my vegetables to taste like vegetables. We had quite a lot of chicken left over, which surprised me because usually my family eats the majority of the chicken, but it made for a really, really hearty soup. Once the bacon and the onions had sauteed long enough, I added all of my other vegetables and the chicken and put in enough broth to cover up to the top, and then I added some Italian seasoning for good flavor. If you would like to, towards the end of cooking the soup, you can also add cream or coconut milk or something creamy to it. It also tastes really good that way, and it is something I normally do, just I forgot to film it. This was enough soup to last us for a full 2 days. I'm guessing if you are just one person, you could make this at the beginning of the week and eat it all week long. It might get tiring, but it is a really good economical meal that will last you for a while if you want to freeze it. The last meal I decided to make was an old-fashioned fish pie. I have to admit I wanted to make this because I have been playing the Tales of the Shire a lot, and one of the main meals that you cook in those games is a fish pie, which I've never had. I was a little unsure how it would turn out. I couldn't really imagine what the flavor profile would be. I do make pot pies every so often, but I just wasn't sure whether I would actually like this. I added some cod to a pan and put in some tarragon, some butter, and some salt, and cooked this until the fish was flaky. While that was cooking, I made a pie crust. I have this recipe somewhere on my Ko-Fi. I will try to link it below. I believe it is with the bundle of apple and blackberry pies. And instead of adding sugar, I added in some salt and some tarragon to tie in the flavors to the fish. Once the fish was done, I got it out and flaked it into a bowl and then added 2 cups of breadcrumbs and 1 cup of hot milk to the bowl, as well as 2 tablespoons of minced parsley, 2 tablespoons of minced onion, a teaspoon of salt, an 1/8 teaspoon of pepper, and this also calls for 1.5 tablespoons of prepared mustard, which I completely forgot to add. Then you add 1/4 cup of melted butter or margarine and 3 cups of flaked cooked cod, haddock, whitefish, flounder, or salmon. Put all of this into the pie crust and cover it with a lattice top. Bake for 45 minutes at 375 degrees. I did top this with some butter because the fish mixture was good, but it did seem kind of dry, and I didn't really want to eat a super dry, fishy pie. As for the flavor, it did turn out to taste good, but I think it was still really dry, and it would do well to have some kind of white sauce, and in my opinion, it would taste really good with peas.
wanted to go over, number one, what I actually spent for these 6 meals for the week, and number two, what you would have to spend if you had to buy everything except for salt and pepper. I spent just over $26 buying the ingredients that I needed. I did have a lot of these ingredients in my pantry already. I tend to keep my pantry stocked with certain things like rice and pasta and flour, sugar, all of the really basic things. Tomato sauce is a big one. And I find that I can get a variety of meals from stocking those few things, and always having like a whole chicken in my freezer, stocking up on ground beef when it's on sale. Things like that are so incredibly helpful to have on hand, because you can create a variety of flavor profiles if you have those few basics in your pantry, and then you add in things like spices or little extra vegetables here and there. Even if you're using canned vegetables, those are great ways to supplement your foods. So I spent $26. I had to buy a bag of onions, a thing of celery, parsley, tarragon, tomatoes, breadcrumbs, and cod for the fish pie. And I'm gonna be really honest, I think that's an incredible price for 6 meals for a family of 7. Of course, I did also eat stuff like the sourdough bread, which we had on hand. And for the fish pie, I added some frozen peas that were already in my pantry and made a white sauce from milk and flour. But overall, $26 for 6 meals to feed my whole family, and they liked all of it. It was really good. And the things like the soup, which I got from the roast chicken, I have so much left over. I have so much left over. I will absolutely be able to use that for 2 meals. So I would say if you are struggling and you need a meal that you can make, which you don't have to supplement with a bunch of sides, make some soup. As far as what it would cost you to go out and purchase everything except for salt and pepper, I calculated it on Walmart. Here is the cart, and the price was, as you can see, just over $78, which again, I think is a really fantastic price for 6 dinners for a family of 7. And if you have fewer people in your family, you could probably cut out a couple of these meals, make the 2 soups and the potatoes and gravy and chicken. You might be good to go for the week. So I hope that you enjoyed this. I would say if you are looking to try to stock up your pantry, the things that work really well for me are to always have rice, pasta, tomato sauce or tomato paste, diced tomatoes, canned, all of these things canned. Have some canned vegetables. I personally really like green beans, but you could do corn, you could do peas, you could do whatever canned vegetables you like. Stock up on some frozen vegetables, stock up on some ground beef when it's on sale, and stock up on having some whole chickens, because I think that that is one of the best ways to get multiple meals out of one source of protein. Let me know if you would like me to do a full video on stocking my pantry, the things that I always keep on hand so that I always have something to cook, especially on the weeks when, especially back when times were fairly hard for our family and we really didn't have a lot of money to spend on food. I would love to do that. I would love to put that together to help you navigate how to stock up your pantry so that when you do have a hard week or you are living a few months of paycheck to paycheck, you still have food you can cook for your family. With that said, that is all for today. I will list the vintage cookbook down below. I will try to post photos of the recipes over on my Ko-Fi page, which you can also find in my description down below, or you can type in this little address to get there. As always, I hope that wherever you are feeling safe and loved, and I will see you in my next video. Mwah! I really shouldn't do that. Well, I guess now you can all see me through rose-colored glasses. Or, in reality, lipstick-covered lenses. Okay, bye.